Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, we'll just point to you and you'll be like, I got nothing to say. And then you can say, it's going to be a great day.
No, that you point and then he has nothing to say. You say, today's going to be a great day.
That's right. It's going to be a great day. Mostly because we've already started recording and Jamie doesn't even realize it.
How fun.
Yeah.
Happy to be a part of it.
Happy to have the listeners here. Good night, Jamie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone else, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast. I'm Harry, your host. Jamie was our host. She's going to bed currently.
Yeah, she hung up
I'm here
on
with
us.
Rafe,
Right.
and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it is a great day to be doing a podcast with you. Thank you, Harry, very much. And thank you to all our great listeners. Because of you, we are a global top 10% podcast. You can reach us as usual at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us 5-star reviews, subscribe. You know, I will say subscribe, Harry, but on certain apps, it's not called subscribe. It's actually called follow. So if you're looking for a subscribe button because you really want to do as we instruct you to do, it might not be called subscribe. It might be called follow. So make sure you do that. Give us lots of likes and smiley stars and very good things like that. And that will make us happy. And when we're happy, we'll make great content. And then you'll be happy. So that'll be a wonderful thing. And remember, tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode. And, talk about this at the at work, at the break room. When your boss says, are there any questions? You can ask things like, why aren't you listening to the buff? When you're in traffic and somebody's next to you, roll down your window, tell them to listen to the buff. Feel free to get out a can of spray paint and paint, listen to the buff on a boxcar that's rolling by. Any of those things that are legit. As long as you don't say that we asked you to do that, that would be a good thing. Graffiti is generally frowned upon unless it's high art, which is probably
No, or just get the police's permission and
when they're arresting you, tell them to listen to the buff, right? It's all about.
Please don't get arrested on our behalf.
Yes. And if you get a picture of you arrested, make sure you get a picture of your phone with the buff podcast on it, with the New Orleans finest or whoever it is that's pulling you over, and get a picture of you guys all together listening to buff.
We'll pay half your parking ticket.
Yes, we'll pay the half that doesn't cost anything. That's our plan. Harry, spring is here.
It is. Thankfully, the weather's warmer here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It's we're finally getting temperatures up in the 70s, but I think we're also getting plenty of what you're getting, which is rain.
Rain and wind are the things of spring. Did you ever hear the adage that March comes in like a lion and out like a lamb? Have you ever heard that?
Yes, every single day of my childhood.
Did you really? Okay, so I must have said that. So, well, I always heard that, and I didn't really think much about it other than, I guess it's one of the first. What's the word? It's a
metaphor.
Metaphor. Yeah, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's a semaphore. It's a metaphor. Well, it's the metaphor, like the lion and the lamb. The lion is all rough and tough and king of the jungle, and the lamb is all meek and mild. And March starts in winter and ends in spring. So that's lion and lamb thing. But March also starts in the constellation of Leo and ends in Aries. So, that's like a lion and a lamb. So it's not even a metaphor there. It's really just an assignment of the zodiac. So that's kind of fun. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not a zoologist or an astrophysiologist, whatever. What are they called? Astrology?
I think you asked astrologist. Yeah. I don't really think there's a whole lot of animal study that takes place in astrology.
Yeah, probably not.
Well, anyway, if you listen to the buff regularly, we like to think of the year starting at the equinox, certainly in the spring. And that's unfortunate to our friends down under because then it starts in the fall for them. But they could start their year in their spring. And we just, there are other years other than
We just have constant years and New Year's popping up all over the place. More celebrations.
Yes. At any time you can have a New Year's Eve party, it's a good thing, I think. So, with spring though, and new things coming, the bulbs are starting to push up through the ground. We're gonna have to talk to Bob one of these days about how his flowers are doing. But I started thinking about how things get made new and how new things are. And so, of course, whenever I do that, I start at the beginning, and the beginning for me always is
Genesis.
It's Genesis, right? Okay, that's what that word means, right? It's the beginning. So, okay, so if you start at the book of Genesis, Genesis 1 and 2, that's in the beginning, right? We learn how things were, right? That's the this is a model for understanding relationships between man and the cosmos, between man and God and the cosmos, all that kind of thing. So in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was without form or shape, and darkness over the abyss, and a mighty wind sweeping over the waters. That's the first two pieces. Okay. And the interesting thing about this, I think, is that the earth was without form or shape, which means there was just chaos there. There was nothing, and chaos in the sense not of like people running around throwing burning torches and rocks and stuff, but there's no form, there's no order on things. And if you look at the study of the cosmogony of the times, they talk about an infinite ocean in an abyss, and the earth was fully surrounded by the water, right? So there's no form here. There's earth in there, but you really can't see it and you can't get to it. So there is nothing but water all around. And then the other thing present was a mighty wind sweeping over the water. So we have these two very important things that are present at the beginning. We have spirit and breath of God, which is the wind, and then we have water. So we have, like we have now in spring, we get
something that cleanses.
Yes, we get a cleansing thing, and we get wind and water. Okay, so the depending on exactly how the title of the show goes, it's going to be something like wind and water. Okay, because that's what spring gives us, and spring talks about new things, and we will learn that this concept of wind and water is in a lot of places how God makes things new. I guess that's the spoiler. We're already there, and it's only a couple minutes into this ordeal. Okay, so then you get to verses 3 through 10, and I'll go through this pretty quick because a lot of you have heard this. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. He saw the light was good. And then he separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day and the darkness night. Evening came and morning followed the first day. So evening and then morning. So their day starts at sundown, and that's a thing, a Middle Eastern thing, and it's
a Judaic thing as well, right?
Yeah, a Jewish thing. So, all right, and then God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters to separate one body of water from the other." God made the dome, and it separated the water below the dome from the water above the dome, and so it happened. And God called the dome sky, and evening came, morning followed the second day, and God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered into a single basin, so that the dry land may appear." And so it happened, and the water under the sky was gathered into its basin, and dry land appeared. And God called the dry land earth, and the basin of the water he called sea, and God saw that it was good. So we start with this chaos, with things with no form. There's void, there's just water, there's wind, and the first thing God creates is order. And this is a different thing than some of the creation stories that come out of antiquity. Is the Jewish God, the Judeo-Christian God, creates order out of things. And this is the first piece of that there. He doesn't create a mess. He doesn't create problems. He creates order and structure, okay? And then he makes light so we can see, and then he separates the water so you can actually see the earth. So the earth actually comes into being with the removal of the water, right? And this was interesting when I looked this up. Some of the water is below and some of it is above, and it's divided into essentially three components. And it sounds like there's two, but there's really three.
That's why there's water on Mars, right?
Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but that's what okay. So that's an interesting thing. Okay, so let's stop right there. Is there water on Mars? I don't know. Bob probably thinks there may be some water, maybe at the poles. There's apparently some water frozen in the moon somewhere. That's a not irrelevant question to this context. So in light of understanding this thing, it's immaterial. That is an immaterial thing.
Else. Yeah.
It's a different component. So that's a good question. It's not answered in this story. So we can reason about it and make conjecture and then collect data and do those sorts of things. Okay. The water is divided into three components. You have the sea, which is the salt water in the basin. Remember, he said he put the water in the basin. And then there's fresh water under the earth. And you know that if you dig down there, in a well, you'll find water. Okay, so there's water under the earth, but there's also fresh water above the dome. All right? And the dome is that word, it's dome in the translation I'm reading. But the Hebrew word for that is something like gigantic metal dome. Is kind of what, like this idea that there is actually a thing, a physical thing that holds up the sky. The sky actually holds up the water above the firmament. The firmament is that thing that holds up the water, and that water that's above the firmament is going to be rain. That's the stuff that falls down, and the water below the earth, that's the water that springs up through wells and fountains and stuff like that. And then you have the third kind, which is the ocean, which is salt water. All right, so you have these three kinds of things, but everything starts there, and starts with water and wind, right? And the wind is quite literally the Spirit of God, and the water as well. That's everywhere else. But just like springtime, things start with wind and water. All right.
Yeah, but that's what I'm experiencing every single day here.
Yes, and sometimes the water sits on the ground for a while and then goes into the ground, and we get. But this is going to be important in the next story, which of course is Noah's Ark. Okay.
Yes.
And
to
what
which
was
you asked me one question.
I did. I'm going to get this one. Okay. So, all right. So the broad question is, how well do you know the Noah's Ark story? Chapter 7 of Genesis starts out this way. The Lord said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for you alone in this generation have I found to be righteous before me. Of every clean animal, take with you 7 pairs, a male and its mate, and of the unclean animals, 1 pair, a male and its mate. Likewise, of every bird of the air, 7 pairs, a male and a female, to keep their progeny alive over all the earth. For 7 days from now, I will bring rain down on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and so I will wipe out from the face of the earth every being that I have made." Noah complied just as the Lord had commanded. Did you know about the 7?
I did not.
I had no idea. I was like, no one ever
Seems like
talks.
every single creature in every single painting is one of those unclean creatures.
Must be well. See, and I think the issue. Okay, and if you go back before that and read in chapter 6, he does say, after he tells you to bring 2 of every one of these, 2 of every kind of animal. Moreover, you are to provide yourself with all the food that is to be eaten.
Well, that checks out.
And I'll bet that the 7 slowly
dwindled amongst.
Sorry, we're down
pairs.
to 6. We're down to 5. Okay, and
Well, you survived on an elephant for quite some time. I would.
Yes, you know how you eat an elephant, Harry.
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. That's right. Okay, so he's got 7 days to get in the ark. They're going to have to get all these people lined up. Everybody wants to be first one in to get the overhead space, right, for your luggage and stuff.
Yep.
So, all right, so they got in there. All right, verse 11. This was fascinating. In the 600th year of Noah's life. Okay,
I am quite young.
right? 600th year. In the 2nd month, on the 17th day. So remember, it's essentially February 17th of his life. Okay, so assuming he starts January 1. Okay, so early. Remember, 2nd month, 17th day. Okay. On that day, quote, "all the fountains of the great abyss burst forth, and the floodgates of the sky were opened." Okay, so we got water in 3 places. We got water above the firmament. We got water in the ground, and then we got the water in the ocean. But keep in mind, the great abyss burst forth. So there was water coming not just from rain, but it was like coming up out of the ground, and the oceans were moving up onto, and like it was like
Geysers were going nuts. You didn't want to be anywhere near Yellowstone.
this was a cataclysm of biblical proportion. And it wasn't just rain. This was an ordeal. Okay. And I just thought it just started raining. But no, remember, the abyss burst forth, and for 40 days and nights, heavy rain poured down on the earth. Okay. And then they get into the ark, And the ark rides along on the waves, and the water eventually is like 15 feet higher than the tallest mountain. Okay? So, all right, great. We got that. Verse 24. And when the waters had swelled on the earth for 150 days, okay?
Quite some time.
150 days. That's 5 months. That's almost 4 times 40 days, okay? So after 150 days, God remembered Noah and all the animals. Oh, shoot, I left those guys in the flood.
Oh, I haven't seen my creatures in weeks.
That's where they are. God remembered Noah and all the animals, wild and tame, that were with him on the ark. So God made a what? A wind sweep over the earth, and the waters began to subside. The fountains of the abyss, remember, you got the abyss and the fountains. The fountains of the abyss and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the downpour from the sky was held back. All right, so this, because people always do this thing. Well, if it only rained for 40 days and 40 nights, you couldn't generate enough water to, they start doing this math and math. Math. They start doing this math about how much water would you need to flood the whole earth. Okay. Well, it was 100. First of all, it wasn't 40 days. It was 150 days. And not only that, the rain wasn't coming only from the sky. It was coming from the sky and from underground. So just keep that in mind. Okay. God made a wind sweep over the earth, and waters began to subside. The fountains were closed. So it rained for 40 days and nights, and the abyss of the skies were still open for 150 days. Genesis 8:3. Gradually, the waters receded from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters had diminished, so that in the 7th month, okay, so that's 5 months after the 2nd month, on the 17th day, so this is like 5 months after he started, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The waters continued to diminish until the 10th month.
Boy, we thought our week-long flooding was bad.
You think it's bad when you get to the gate and it takes like some time for them to get the door open on the plane. They were sitting there on the mountain for 90 days, waiting for the mountain
Just the
tops
water
to appear.
disappear.
Yeah. And then on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains appeared. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened a hatch of the ark that he had made and released a raven. A raven? It flew back and forth until the waters dried off from the earth. Did you know about the raven?
I knew about the raven.
You did know about the raven. Okay, good.
I did know about the raven. I knew that the first bird that he released was a raven. Yep.
It was a raven. Okay. Genesis 8:8. Then he released a dove to see if the waters had lessened from the earth, but the dove could find no place to perch. It returned to the ark, for there was water all over the earth. Putting out his hand, he caught the dove and drew it back in the ark. He waited 7 more days and released the dove from the ark. In the evening, the dove came back, and in its bill was plucked an olive leaf. So Noah knew the waters had diminished. He waits another 7 days and then releases the dove, but this time it did not come back. So he releases a raven and then a dove once, and it comes back. Then it comes back a second. He waits 7 days, releases it again, and he gets an olive branch, and then releases it a third time, and it does not come back. Okay? Genesis 8:13. In the 601st year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, the water began to dry up on the earth. Noah then removed the cover of the ark and saw that the surface of the ground had dried. Okay, so now at this point, after what started on the 600th year in the 2nd month on the 17th day, and now we're on the 601st year on the 1st month, the 1st day. So
it's been like over 10 months.
Over 10 months, okay? And now the earth is back to the state it is at the beginning. Like at the beginning. It has been wiped clean, and all that's left is Noah, the ark, and whatever animals.
Been remade.
It has been remade through wind and water. And 8:14, in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. So they get on the ark on the 600th year, on the 2nd month, 17th day. They get off the ark on the 601st year, 2nd month, 27th day. It's a full year and 10 days on the ark. Did you know that?
I had here, because you asked me, right? I said, hey, I think it's 40 days. 40 days.
Well, and that's what we all hear. And you know what? Go to the original sources and read them. It's amazing what's in there. Okay, so anyway, so water cleanses, wind dries, and he makes things new. always water and wind. Next story, you know what the next story is?
What's Moses?
It's Moses, all right? Exodus 14:21. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove back the sea with a strong east wind all night long and turned the sea into dry ground, and the waters were split. So the Israelites entered into the midst of the sea on dry land with the water as a wall on their right and on their left. So the Israelites, when they get out of slavery in Egypt and when they get away from Pharaoh, they go through water via wind, right? The breath of God gets them out of slavery, okay? Water and wind. And all of this, of course, Harry, leads to baptism.
Yeah.
All right. That's, when we were talking about setting these things up, you said, Dad, I think this sounds like it's going to baptism. I was like,
oh, just like it's every single homily I've heard on a Sunday whenever there's baptism involved. This time it's just coming from my dad.
Yeah. I do have a glass of water, but I have no baby to pour it on. So,
that's right.
Or adult human. So, all right. So all this leads to baptism. Baptism is from the Greek baptizion, which means to plunge or immerse, right? And this plunging symbolizes one's burial into Christ's death, from which he rises up by resurrection with him as a new creature. Okay, this is from the Catechism. Catechism 1215 says, this is also a washing and regeneration and renewal by the Spirit, water and wind. Okay.
Once again. Yep.
Yes. Christ was baptized by John in the Jordan. Now, it's interesting. There's another piece here. And I left it out, but I'm going to put it back in. That okay, so I didn't know this. I had forgotten this part of the story. Okay. They get through the, they go through the sea, and the Pharaoh and all the Egyptians get all drowned up in the sea, and Pharaoh goes back home sad. And the Israelites, then they wander around the desert for 40 years, right? Trying to get to the promised land, and eventually get to the River Jordan, and they cross the River Jordan, right? And they do it by a similar manner. They take the ark to the edge of the river, the Ark of the Covenant, and one priest, one representative from each of the 12 tribes is carrying the ark. And when they step foot in the water, the river stops flowing. And it's at flood stage, because it's the middle of whatever flood stage season there. And the river stops flowing, and they walk out with the ark in the middle on the dry land. And then all the Israelites go across, except for Moses. He doesn't get to go, right? Yep. He goes across. And then after that, they pick up 12 rocks out of the river, and they make a monument on the far shore as like, this is the place where we crossed the river, thanks to God stopping the water during the flood. And then they walk to the edge, and when they step out of the river starts flowing again. Water and wind, every time, water and wind. Okay. So Jesus is baptized in the Jordan by John, and after his resurrection gives the command to go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them. Okay.
Yes.
That's what we're supposed to do, is baptize them, right? And after his baptism, when he comes out of the water, the Spirit comes down on him, right, like a dove, right? And we learn that he is God's beloved Son, water and wind, right? And this baptismal rite, as you know, is the first of the 3 initiation rites in the church, right, along with confirmation and Eucharist, right? And in this rite, the sacrament is carried out first with immersion or washing with water, then anointing with sacred chrism, signifying being anointed by the Holy Spirit, just like Christ was anointed priest, prophet, and king. And then the newly baptized is what? Clothed in a
white vestment.
White garment. Yes, that's right. Signifying the person has put on Christ. And then a candle that you light from the Easter candle is lit, signifying that the baptized are in Christ, the light of the world. So the baptized person gets washed, then anointed with the Spirit, and then becomes a new person, right? Water and wind makes things new. All right. So I see all these things, and I keep thinking water and wind are always refreshing things. And whenever I see a bright new morning, or even sometimes a dull morning with gray clouds and stuff, and I realize that during my take on that is, during the darkness of the night, God has scrubbed the earth clean for us and left remnants of this dew on everything, the water, and the morning sunshine and wind dry the land, giving us a brand new day. And that happens every day.
Every day.
We get a new one. We get a new one every day. And what I see when I see little children, you have little children, right?
Two
Before
little
they,
ones. Yep.
yeah, before they get a bath, before they go to bed, they get a bath, right? And they run. Little kids run all day, right? I mean, they're constantly moving. They get grimy and hot and sweaty. They get covered with dirt and ketchup and syrup
yes.
and
They
all manner
really
of things, and covered by other things you really aren't very nice. And then they get a bath, okay? And that veneer of grime that is on them gets scrubbed away, and then the towels and the air or the hairdryer gets them dried off, and then they smell so good. They're like they smell clean, and you can see that they get refreshed, they get cleaned up. And water and wind does that for them. They get their jammies on, then they snuggle in for a story on their parents' knee, and like I said, the water has cleaned them, and the words of the story nourish them. Water and wind have made them new, and I think of that phrase, I make all things new. Revelation 21, the first 5 verses of that chapter is right at the end of Revelation. I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Now, at the beginning of in Genesis, remember the water's in 3 pieces. There's the water above the firmament. There's the water below ground. Those are both fresh water. Those are good water. But the water in the ocean, that ain't good water. Okay. That's the sea. And the sea was always fearful. I mean, you can go on the sea, but you can't go in the sea, right? And you can't even drink the sea. The life-giving water is the water in the firmament or above the firmament and in the ground.
And below. Yep.
Yeah. The water in the sea is not good. Okay. Notice that we have the former heaven and earth have passed away, and the sea was no more. Death was no more, okay? I also saw the holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, God's dwelling is with the human race. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will always be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death or mourning, wailing or pain, for the old order has passed away." The one who sat on the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new. I wash them with water and I breathe new life into them. I make all things new, water and wind, cleansing and new spirit." That is springtime, when the rains come and the winds blow. Every day God makes you into something new.
It's like a really grand bath time.
It is like, and and it's easy to get, it is easy to get down. It is really easy to get down. This in springtime can be like here in Indiana, springtime's not very pleasant, really. It's been cloudy for weeks, and it got a little bit warm, and we had a little bit of sunshine, and then the storms came back, and we're going to get below freezing again tonight, and it's just going to be. But every day there's this little hint of things to remember, that if you look at the dew, feel the wind go, look at the rain, clean
the birds chirp in the morning now.
Yeah, and they weren't doing that before, were they?
No.
Not in the winter, not in the heart of winter. That was, Easter is coming, spring is coming, and it is such a. When I was a kid, it didn't really matter to me because school went by, and you're indoors doing school things, and you might play outside and do stuff. But like as a grown up, I see more now than ever the hope that spring gives.
Well, and like you said, it's in all of these little tiny places, but you have to look for them. I don't think you cannot just go through life going through the motions without recognizing that these things are there. Right? You can't just say, "Oh, there's some morning dew, or there's some water that washes things away, or there's some wind that washes things, or this is or is not an allegory or reflection for greater things in life." You have to at least acknowledge that there is something else, because once you do, everything else here on earth becomes even more grand.
That is a big issue with our view of the world today, certainly, and this is an issue I have too, is so much understanding of the scientific nature of the material world here on the planet. I can look at that and get, you can say, well, the dew and the rain are actually condensation from the atmosphere. And when that reaches below the dew point, then it condenses because the energy is released, and then it just becomes empty, right? Then the water, the water that you sprinkle in baptism, or that you sign yourself with when you enter a holy place, then all of that is the same. And if all of that is the same, the carbon, the nitrogen, the hydrogen, the oxygen that's in your body, you are quite literally a pile of dust. And you are no different when you are alive, sitting there on this chair talking about things, than you are when you're dead. There's nothing there if you ignore the fact that a person animated with life is identical to the person who's dead, with the exception of the life, which is a thing we cannot measure. We cannot quantify. We cannot see. There is a realm past the material. And when you get to see, when you put that focus on and you keep that in mind, you start to see the dew as the evidence of the cleaning, and the wind as the spirit, and you see all things new.
You see all things new, and you mentioned you have to put on this lens of seeing these things as seeing yourself as new. But also in this day and age, you do not put on the lens of, I only want to see things exactly as they are, because you become so material that there is no difference, like you said, between your cells that have a heartbeat pulsing through them and your cells that don't. Because if that's the case, then what are you doing?
Well, then if you get there, then that world leads to a world where there is no morality. You can't say, well, it's wrong to treat the person that way, because you're like, well, he's just a glob of dust. Why does it matter how he's treated? Why does it matter that this woman is treated poorly? Why does it matter that I do the right thing? None of those things matter if the only thing out there is material. There must be something else. And if you firmly believe that there's nothing else, then why do you bother doing the right thing? What are you saying? So this podcast believes there is something else, right? But it takes a while to start to see it. But when you start to see it, it's like when Dorothy steps out of the house in The Wizard of Oz, and the start of Wizard of Oz starts in black and white, right? And then she opens the door when they're in Oz, and the Technicolor comes through. My mom said she saw that movie in the theater when she was a little girl. And she said, the oohs and ahs, when the door opened up and it became color, and people cried. It was like seeing it was like a new thing that you could never imagine before. And Dorothy stepped out into that world. And that's what it's like to put on the lens of faith. You see all these other things, and you get to see that Easter's coming.
I think that's right. And I think that's a great way to put it, putting on the lens of faith. But in the meantime, we always encourage our listeners to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life. It's going to be a great day.